Hi, I'm Eric Lanask here in Anaheim, California at ITEXPO. On the program with me this morning from Netsapiens, Anand Butch. Anand, great to have you on the program.
Thanks for having me back.
Always good to see you. You spent some time on a couple of different panels this week. A couple of them focusing on sort of the open source nature, and specifically one on open source versus commercial soft switches. Why was that particular session of interest to you?
So it was interesting when it came up, and then we had obviously a number of folks that asked us to participate, and the biggest reason is because I think there's some misconceptions about the ease of open source. Mm-hmm. Open source community is obviously alive and well, but the question is when you start having to commercialize a product, what's that next step that you need to take, right? And so the reason it was of interest is that because if you look at our client base, we've had a number of folks that have actually moved over from, an open source type application and have moved into a commercial offering and migrated from, let's say, an Asterisk or a free switch based solution that they may have taken to a particular point, and then they want to grow beyond that. And so we've had a number of folks that we've engaged with, clients that have had prior open source experience, but now they want to move into more of a commercial grade carrier class platform. And so it was interesting because it was certainly certainly not a one or the other scenario. We've seen people successful doing open source, but I think the things that we discussed were, what are the considerations whether you go one way or another.
So for those folks, that you mentioned that, maybe start with an Asterisk or some other open source platform, where do they hit a wall?
So it's interesting. There's a couple of different things that at least we have seen from our client base. From a scale perspective, at some point, unless you have the wherewithal and the talent in-house to be able to really engineer a platform using open source components and build a product, what they find is that they're kind of, piecemealing and growing organically, if you will, and either putting multiple instances of open source together, multiple instances of Asterisks, and so scale becomes one issue. Mm-hmm. The other thing is usability, right? So as an offering gets more and more mature, and you try to span across multiple end users, the product needs to be both internally usable with your administrators, your CSRs, or folks like that. And then, even more importantly, the end user needs to have interfaces that they can use to do those things. So the challenge has become for these, service providers that are built on open source is, okay, now what? Do I have to go find, a set of consultants that can build user interfaces on top of my open source compliant? Do I go look at an open source specific vendor that only builds interfaces? Mm-hmm. You start having to add a lot of complexity to your network, so that becomes a big hurdle. And so then also from a resource perspective, when you start doing that, you say, okay, well, I'm a small and medium-sized service provider. Do I want to focus my attention and energy on building a product or selling a service, right? So, and obviously, when you're small, you've got to make, pretty key decisions about where you utilize your resources. Sure. And so our argument to most people is, spend the time on application layer stuff, spend the time on understanding what your client needs. Don't worry about the plumbing and the core and the infrastructure. Let a vendor worry about that.
So there's an opportunity for somebody like Netsapiens to come in and step in and help them.
That's correct. Yeah. So, and once again, even our platform, even though it's a proprietary platform, it's open standards based, mm-hmm. and there's open APIs on top of the platform. So people still have that level of, customization that they need, and the reason they go to open source in the first place is, hey, look, I control it, I can do whatever I want with it, I can configure it whichever way I want. So we try to maintain that same level of flexibility, but we abstract, if you will, the core infrastructure components, so they don't have to worry about it. The SIP stack and the core application platform and any of the switching functionality that exists.
So that that effectively allows them to focus on the services and the applications that are actually going to generate revenue for them. As you said, let's let the infrastructure experts deal with that.
That's right. Yeah. So and many times what you'll find is that, and in our market, specific to our market, we focus on really the mid-market service providers, and it is incredibly important to differentiate. So, they should be focusing on, what do I do with a platform to make it fit the needs of my particular client base, right? So we have, for example, a number of service providers that focus on different vertical markets, right? So for them to be able to really spend the time and understand what the requirement is, even the technical requirements of what their end user needs, they need to translate that to an application and a revenue generating application quickly. And to have to worry about not only the application, but then also have to worry about maintaining the core platform, that becomes a pretty daunting task.
Does it, generally speaking, does it make sense for service providers to try to start with open source, or does it make sense? Would they be better off with proprietary alternatives?
So that's a great question, and I think it boils down to really where they are in terms of how core the VoIP or UC offering that they have. In our case, how core that is to their offering going forward. And it's also a function of the availability of platforms to be able to jump right into them at a price point that's not daunting, right? So what we see is that we see a number of greenfield folks that have said, okay, I need to start working on something today. The market's moving that much faster. If you asked me that question 5 or 10 years ago, I would say some of these guys are prototyping using Asterix, and maybe it makes sense, and Asterix or FreeSwitch or whatnot, go tinker with it. If you have, once again, it boils down to if you have the engineering talent in-house, you may consider prototyping something, but I think now it's all about time to market, right? There's incredible amounts of competition, and so for you to go build something yourself and do it right, you're going to be behind the pack. So it really depends on your goals and objectives. But if you're a service provider that's very serious about VoIP and UC, and you don't have this world-class engineering team behind you, then commercial's the way to go.
Got it. Excellent. Is that kind of thought process resonating in the market? Is that helping you build your business?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a number of things that are happening is that because we've been in the industry for as long as we have, and we've have a solid kind of thriving set of service providers that are using our platform. We have a lot of success stories of people that have gone from open source to a commercial soft switch, right? So now what's happening is that as that customer base is referred to or referenced, and our new clients are coming to the table and they talk to what's happening in the community, a lot of these guys are driving them towards saying, don't mess with it. Go commercial if you're a small team and you're really focused on understanding what the end user needs. And it doesn't mean you don't use any open source components, right? I mean, part of the discussions that we had in the part of the panels, and we use open source where it's commodity, where it's hardened, where it's well established and well deployed. We use open source components also, but those are databases and operating systems and things that have really hardened in the industry. But when it comes to the application platform, people need a vendor and an engineering team behind that vendor that can really help them. So, yeah, we continue to see that. We also see a lot of people, trying to guide people that are going into the business, saying, choose wisely. It's an incredible amount of work to try to build your own platform.
Sure, absolutely. Well, Anand, as always, great to have you on the program. Great to have you join us here at ITEXPO, and we look forward to catching up with you again next time.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it.
In Anaheim, I'm Eric Lanask. Thank you for watching.